Listeners, right now we are on the line and we have this opportunity at a very important time before the screening this week and then something happening a week from today with David Weisbord. How are you doing? And thank you, David, for taking time out of your schedule to do this interview.
Thank you very much. It'll be my pleasure.
There's a screening happening this Friday dealing with the whole topic. People hopefully have had the chance to be conscious of this issue, and that's why we're doing this interview, is to really get this important issue out there, is the Little Mountain, about the Little Mountain project. But can you fill us in, David, on the whole history of this community and what made it unique, and then unfortunately what has happened over the last couple of years with this community?
Well, it was one of the very first social housing projects to take place, to be built in British Columbia. It was one of the most successful social housing project in the city. It was built, I think it was 1954. It was a very important event because it had been servicemen who had come back from World War II who had fought for its construction. What a lot of people don't realize is that Vancouver has had housing crises throughout its history. And there was a particularly large historical crisis that took place right after World War II when returning vets came back to Vancouver. And they actually squatted in and protested in the Vancouver Hotel for many months in order to protest the lack of housing. And through those protests, Little Mountain was built. And it existed until it resisted a number of attempts to be gentrified throughout its history. I think in the 70s there was talk about demolishing Little Mountain and never came about. And then, of course, in 2007, when the federal government divested its interest in all of its social housing stock, the BC government got its hands on it and immediately made plans to privatize it and sell it to the highest bidder. And at that point, I believe it's a Malaysian company named the Holburn Group promised to pay the most money, and the BC government signed a contract and went ahead and started demolishing Little Mountain.
I remember watching one of the documentaries I saw on this. It was a very unique community. They interviewed, in this particular documentary I saw, the people who grew up there as children, and people, it was a community. Like, people looked out for each other, and children had this freedom.
Well, yeah, it was kind of a community of, there was a lot of access to green space within the center of it. And people looked into that green space from their apartments and their homes. And so everyone felt really safe within that environment, and it created a really safe environment to grow up in. However, to people who lived outside of that social housing complex, it didn't look the same. You just see this sort of, very blank, utilitarian architecture, and it would kind of put people off. But if you actually went into the inside and looked at it from the other way, from the inside out rather than the outside in, the perspective was entirely different. And there's a term in social planning called social capital. And social capital is what's generated when people help one another. It's the product of sharing and caring in communities.
Over the years, the housing units have been taken away, but people have been coerced over the years. But how are you supposed to leave a community that, like you're talking about, social capital, a very unique place, and you grew up? There are people like elderly people and people on disability who don't want to leave there.
Yeah, well, they suffered a lot. I mean, a lot of elderly people suffered a lot moving to places that were much more rough, that were much more difficult to live in, that had bugs. I mean, I personally interviewed people who were very unhappy with where they'd gone. but the contracts they signed on leaving Little Mountain pretty well, made it very difficult for them to change their housing once they'd moved away. I have yet to finish all the interviews I want to do for the film itself, and I'm going to learn more about it during the last the last 100 hours I shoot for this documentary will be to find out all the people, interviewed dozens of people who live there and really get the full story, because I've been following since 2008 the ongoing events as they unfold, and the latest of which is the eviction of the last 4 tenants from the last building at Little Mountain, which is a continuation of the same just blunt, unsuccessful plan that resulted in the demolition of the entire project from 5 to 25 years early.
And David, trying to conveying this whole story, and also on a macro level, to kind of exploit this whole social housing issue and how it kind of needs to be more of a priority for the government. If it's okay, I guess in a nutshell, if it's possible, to talk about the approach you take through, cinematography and music scores to effectively convey the messages you want to convey to the audience.
Well, look, cinema is all about music and sound. At this point, my films the films I'm presenting are quite I would have to say spare. Although Red One invents his own rap on the spot, which I think is great, and it's what makes that thesis so powerful. There's also music on other aspects of. I'm showing one piece, which is actually a promotional piece I used in order to look for financing for the documentary, which includes music. And that's all very powerful and helps to move the audience. But the issues for me right now are about the way government takes care of people, the way people take care of one another, and I think we've just got to do a better job. And I think right now there are people at Little Mountain whose lives are basically going to be threatened by the eviction because we moved there. It's a blind couple. Their name is Sammy and Joan Chang. And if you go online and Google the eviction of Sammy and Joan, you can watch the video. I think when lives are on the line, based on policies that are not basically justifiable, and business deals that have ruined the lives of an entire group of people who lived at Little Mountain, when decisions are made that don't have any heart in them, they've got to be challenged. And the reason why I'm showing these movies right now is to challenge that decision and to bring public awareness to what's going on right now at Little Mountain. I mean, my final documentary, the feature documentary I produced about Little Mountain maybe 5 years from now, will be a long and, a cinematic experience with music and, the whole deal. But the events at Little Mountain will be over. And I don't want to make films about things that are done. I also want to make films about things that are happening right now. So if I can cut together short films that are engaging and emotionally powerful and intellectually stimulating, I'll do it. And if it can help to change events that are taking place right now, I'll do it. Because that's what I think my role as a filmmaker is also, not just to entertain festival audiences at some time in the future. Even if entertaining them means, enlightening them about housing issues, which is very important.
And David, the screening is happening this Friday at the Little Mountain Gallery. What time does the screening start?
The screening starts at 7 o'clock.
And where is Little Mountain Gallery?
Little Mountain Gallery is almost at the corner of 26th and Main Street. So just across from the Van City Bank, the credit union on 26th and Main. It's been around for about 20 years now. It's a very cool gallery. Lots of cool stuff goes on there. And I think it's going to be a great little screening. And hopefully Red One will come down as well.
And then a week for today for our CJSF listeners, and then, 6 days from today for our civil listeners. On the Monday, the 29th, there's a event, a special, something happening on that day where, listeners can actually get involved.
Exactly. There's going to be, that is the actual date of the hearing that is taking place, the adjudication, basically, of the request by the last tenants to stay at Little Mountain, and it takes place at the rental tenancy branch. And I think you have the contact info there. People can find out about it online also, and I think you've got the information. But that's when it basically, that's the big event coming up on the 29th, Monday the 29th, when we'll see whether or not the tenants get to stay or not.
There's a Facebook group, right? They can,
yes.
Vancouver's Renters Union?
The Vancouver's Renters Union, the Vancouver Renters Union has a Facebook site, and they can link to that and find out more about it if they want to get involved and come down and attend the rally. It's all about getting press, right? They can also send emails to the mayor and council about this, and you can find and other provincial leaders. They can find out about that through my website, littlemountainproject.com. There's a number of things one can do, and it's getting near the wire though now, and we have about a week left before we can try to stop this thing from happening. And I'll be posting throughout the week, this week coming up, leading up to the rental tenancy hearing, about what's going on. They can also listen to David Chodnovsky's speech at Vancouver City Hall 2 weeks ago. It was a really good speech about what City Hall should do to support the tenants. That also happened at a meeting where I also screened the eviction of Sammy and Joan to Mayor and Council. So Mayor and Council are very much aware of the issues around the eviction of the last tenants at Little Mountain, and they have to act accordingly. And actually, there was Adrienne Carr at that meeting said she would be very happy to make a motion to defend the tenants at Little Mountain and to condemn the evictions. And I'm not sure whether she made that motion yet. She didn't make it on the date. And I'm going to call on Monday and find out whether that motion was made. And if it wasn't made, I'm going to start to bug them a bit about that. I'm going to start to send emails to ask them when that motion was made and whether or not it was supported by council.
Listeners, the screening of 6 short films about the Little Mountain Project, housing project,
yep.
By David Vaisborg.
Yep.
Will be happening this Friday, 7 p.m. at the Little Mountain Gallery. That's on 26th and Main. And then, check if you have time, or if you can make the time to check out those other links to get all the information on what is happening with Little Mountain for the important event, important hearing that is happening next Monday on the 29th. Thanks, David, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this interview.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoy talking to people about it, and I hope people come up to the screening and get more involved in important civic events. Making the film on Little Mountain really got me involved in ways I never thought I would get involved with. I've really become a more civic-minded person since I began making this film, and I think it's opened my eyes to a lot of things that are going on in this city. So thank you so much. Well, thanks, Nick. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you at the screening on Friday.